Thank you, Mr. Rajan. Friends, I am not an expert on women's empowerment. Therefore, what I'll do is I'll share a few reflections as a fellow human being. Unlike your MD, Mr. Kamath, I did not have the privilege of growing up with girls. We are an all-male family. Of course, a mother is there, but otherwise we are all male kids. And while at school, it was a co-ed school in a village. I went to a village school. But I left that school by the age of 13 and I went to what we call college for intermediate, Loyola, which was again a boys' college. So I didn't have the privilege of growing up with girls. I was incredibly shy for that reason. I remember when I joined medical school, as part of the initiation, this process of ragging or whatever you call it. As a freshman, I was asked by my seniors to go and find out a girl's name in the college. I was terribly shy, terrified of going to any girl and asking for the name. Then I found at some distance one of the girl students who wore a cassock. She was a nun, a Catholic nun, a medical student, Sister Josephine, I still remember. I summoned enough courage because I could go to a nun and talk to her. So I went to her and asked her, "Sister, forgive me, but they're forcing me to get your name. Will you please give me your name?" She said, "Sister Josephine." I came back and dutifully reported. And the kind of tongue lashing I got, I even now remember. You got a chance to talk to a girl and all that you could do is go to a nun. So I grew up in that milieu. But we all have experience in a variety of ways of what's happening to our society. In every culture, in every society, in every religion, no matter what we claim, there has been institutionalized discrimination of the female gender throughout the ages. Of that, there is no doubt at all. I don't think we need to go into evidence and so on and so forth. The challenge for mankind has been, how do we overcome that in modern era? From the point of view of human rights, from the point of view of the need to engage half the population in the productive economic activity, and from the point of view of utilizing the gene pool, which is otherwise not adequately put to use for human good. From all three perspectives, in the last 100, 200 years, mankind began to recognize that we lose if we don't really tap this talent. And I think there has been some improvement, even in a country like ours. My own personal observation from childhood onwards is, an old aunt of mine, though an aunt, actually she was a great aunt kind of thing, she was my grandmother's generation. She raised me. She was more or less like mother to me in the village. She was a childhood widow, not too long ago. First of all, there was a child marriage, married another boy. Unfortunately, that boy died in an accident because he fell in a well. In those days, accidents mean you fall into a well or something. He was drawing water and then he fell into that. Probably didn't know swimming and he died. And this young girl refused to remarry. Her father asked her to remarry, not because of social reform, but because she was the only child. And her mother was already ill, unlikely to have any further children. And therefore, he wanted her to remarry so that there is continuity of line. And see the way the culture impacted her life. At that very tender age of 9 or 10, when she lost her husband, or maybe 10, 12, when she was asked this question, 12 or 13, when she was asked this question to remarry, the culture imposed so much of servitude in her mind that she refused to remarry. Because in her mind, it was wrong for a girl to remarry after losing a husband. And basically, what were those people in those days? Once you were a childhood widow or a widow, you were an unpaid slave for all the family until the end of your life. There may be also some affection and love because you belong to the family. But essentially, you're an unpaid slave for everybody. Then take my mother's generation. My mother is an incredibly intelligent woman. She is probably one of the most intelligent persons I have known in life. But she could not pursue education beyond 8th grade because in her village, they had in those days schooling only up to 8th grade. So her father and others, they thought, no, it's infratic for us to send our girl to another village or another place to study. Again, izzat, feudal notion. It's not overt discrimination of girls. Overt discrimination is easier to fight. But the cultural nuances and norms that say, how can my girl go to another village and study? Another place and study? Not done. And despite her obvious ability, she had to stop her education. When it comes to our generation, things definitely began to improve. By the time of my children's generation, things are much better. When I joined medicine, there was a 30% reservation in medical school for girls. Probably some of the contemporaries of mine, my fellow students in medicine, they did get through because of that quota. Today, my daughter, she finished medicine from Gandhi Medical College. 60 to 65% of the medical students are girls by virtue of merit. Today, boys need reservation in medical schools and in many other schools and colleges. So there has been a change, there's no question about it. But two perspectives I want us to reflect on. The first is the notion that girls are somehow physically or otherwise inferior is still a prevalent notion. In fact, our culture, what are the words we use for girls? Abala. You all recall some of the words in Telugu literature? Abala. What is the meaning of abala? Na bala. Weak. No strength. Or 100 other expressions. We have internalized these notions. I am a medical student, as I said, and a student of biology. What is the genetic truth? The men here will be a little embarrassed to hear this. Genetically, by nature, girls are far superior to boys. The average lifespan of women world over is 4 years to 5 years longer than men. Natural lifespan. That is why nature actually balances that by having in the gender selection more boys born than girls, so that there is eventually equality, parity, because many more boys die prematurely. So nature actually endowed girls with greater strength. We never discuss this. We somehow inculcate a notion that girls are inferior. The second part, while improvements are taking place, those improvements are largely limited to our class, the middle class, with some education, some formal employment or profession, some reasonable income, some amount of security. In this class, the girls are definitely advancing. There is vertical mobility now. But the tragedy of India is we are possibly the only country in the world. I wanted to reflect on this. And certainly the only major economy in the world where the women's participation in labor force is actually declining. Everywhere in the world, women's participation continues to grow because from next to nothing, women are playing an important role in labor market. India is the only country where women's participation is actually declining. Largely because the poorer sections are withdrawing their girls and women from the labor market. Why? Some of you might have heard of a sociologist called M.N. Srinivas. Anybody remember that name? Okay. We're all technocrats who decided not to know anything outside that sphere. M.N. Srinivas is one of India's greatest sociologists. He coined an expression called Sanskritization, that the quote-unquote lower classes in India, in a caste-ridden system, as they increase their prosperity, they imitate the upper castes and upper classes. Their food habits, their dress, their speech, there are many other things they try to imitate. It is a form of what you call Sanskritization. Something of that kind is happening, but in a wrong way, in case of the poorer sections in dealing with women's empowerment. As people are slightly above starvation, they're poor, but it's no longer a starvation level, that if I don't work for the wage today, I will starve is no longer true in most cases. They're just about subsistence survival. So what they're doing is, because most of the work opportunities for poorer women in our country are in the menial service sector, domestic servants, the kitchen staff, and things like that. So the families are saying, because now we have enough to eat, our women shall not work as these low-wage slaves in the menial jobs. And this society, our society has not found an answer to this yet. But there is an answer. It's not that these families are opposed to women's employment. It is that they are opposed to women's employment at that level. It is insulting, it is undignified. There could also be sexual exploitation and personal harm. For these reasons, they want to withdraw, understandable. But in a sensible economy, in a rational system, we could address that. Let me give you an example. There's a place called Achyutapuram in Visakhapatnam district. Some of you know the place. There's a company called Brandix. It's a Sri Lankan company. They invested in India, not even multinational like US-based companies. It's a Sri Lankan. It's a poor country, cousin, a small country. They established a first-rate garment-making industry there. And they had a tie-up with one of the leading brands in the world. I think in this case, Victoria's Secret or some such thing. 22,000 women are employed in that one company. In hundreds of villages surrounding Achyutapuram, in 2 or 3 districts, there is not a single village where any girl of working age does not find employment if she wishes to work. Just one company, because this is honorable work. This is garment making. They don't get great wage. They get about 8,000-10,000 rupees. Some health coverage and creche for the children there. Organized sector, regular working hours. There are shifts, and they're all transported from village to the workplace and then back by buses every day. So they're not dislocated from the family. And even a 10,000 rupee income or 8,000 rupee income, assured income, in organized sector, and they can quickly acquire skills, gives them enormous dignity and power. And because they're not dislocated, they're willing to work. Just one factory could empower 22,000 women and their families. If we had any sense as a country, we should have and could have established such a factory in every district of India. But we have only one such factory in all of India, to the best of my knowledge. So if a nation does not move up the value chain, does not build infrastructure to get into the modern supply chains to meet the requirements of the economy all over the world, then the people who are going to lose out are the ones who are most vulnerable. In this case, women of the poorer sections. And when you make efforts to change that, you can see results in front of you. In fact, if any of you has a chance, next time you go to Vizag, please do visit this place. Go around, ask the workers, ask the families. So it's possible, but we're not doing it. Now, giving bhashans about empowerment without actually doing what it takes to empower, that's very Indian. We are very big with speeches, very big with bhashans. No, from a cow to Bharat Mata, to national flag, to anything, we give fantastic fiery speeches. But we actually don't do what it takes to achieve what we are articulating, or the slogans that we are shouting. Let me conclude by just listing some of the things that we have to keep in mind in the coming years and maybe a decade or two, to genuinely create a hospitable environment for women to participate productively in the social and economic sphere of our life as equal partners. One is raising children. Now that I'm a father of a girl child, I have a boy also, I can tell you categorically, any day if you have a choice, choose girls. Girls are infinitely better than boys. I know the boys here will be squirming because boys are raised to believe that they have entitlements. It is a birthright to be treated differently. Girls are raised to recognize responsibility. Every household, with very few exceptions, this is the story. You ask any parent in the country. You go to any college, any university. I've gone to scores of universities, if not hundreds, all over the country and great institutions of learning in this country. In 95% cases, in every institution, the best performers are girls. I've seen hardly any exception anywhere. We have to raise our boys better. We cannot continue to raise our boys with a sense of entitlement by virtue of their gender, not accomplishment or hard work, and then expect that the girls will have an atmosphere conducive to vertical mobility and success without inviting jealousy, violence, and cruelty. It is in our interest. The second is the atmosphere we create in the society. We all know, culturally, the kind of taboos even today we continue to nurture and harbor. When it comes to girls, from the dress to what they do. In the olden days, the talk used to be, if a girl goes out, you just bend your head, go to the destination, then raise your head. Then again bend your head, come back and raise your head. So basically be submissive. These cultural taboos, we have to address them, honestly. The third, one of the biggest factors that could seriously undermine women's empowerment in our country in the coming years is the perception, may not be reality, perception of increased crime against women. The moment something like what happened in Hyderabad or Shamshabad or whatever the place was some months ago, or in Delhi or another city, the moment something like that happens, the number of families that are worried about the girl's safety, and therefore that becomes a mechanism to further incapacitate girls, deny them opportunity. That's not the answer. But there's no point giving speeches. We have to create a framework of rule of law. As the nation gets increasingly urbanized, the social controls that are so far keeping order in society and giving us protection, and we are remarkably lucky that way. For a country of our poverty, our backwardness, India is one of the most stable and peaceful societies because families are very strong. Peer pressure is there. If I misbehave, if my parents get to know, my peers get to know, the society gets to know, it will be bad for me. So there are many cultural and societal norms which make people behave in a sensible way most of the time. If you go to some other societies which are more volatile, you realize what I'm saying. Go to Nigeria, go to Nairobi in Kenya, go to Johannesburg in South Africa, go to Mexico City, go to Karachi, go to many other places on earth. You will suddenly realize that we are actually living in a very sensible society. But this good fortune will not last forever. As we get more and more urbanized, more and more industrialized, inevitably the families become less and less strong. Inevitably the social controls, which are possible only when everybody knows everybody else, the social controls will be weakened, and therefore the crime will slowly rise. And unless the society builds institutions and mechanisms to maintain order in society through legal means, not simply bumping them off on the streets of Hyderabad, that is not the answer to the problem, because tomorrow they can bump you off and bump me off. You have to have a due process which guarantees that crime will be punished swiftly, surely, and fairly. Unless that confidence is there, the section that will suffer most will be the most vulnerable sections. That means women and the poorer sections. We need to address this. Fourth is workplace. A place like this, I have absolutely no doubt, enlightened, globally exposed. But there are many places, even today, when the woman is in the workplace, there is a sense of insecurity, there is gender harassment, and there is discrimination without explicitly stating so, and there is work under duress. We have to create conditions. Courts and all are coming up, all kinds of things, but we don't have to go to courts all the time. We have to create institutional mechanisms on a sustained basis as a matter of routine, as a part of our culture. Not as a checklist, all right, I just tick this box. But a robust institutional mechanism which is predictable, which is sensible, which is effective, universally and on a sustained basis. Finally, home and family. Apart from raising children, we still have a society, world over perhaps it's the case, but in India much more so, where the male has a very fragile ego. And therefore there's a lot of insecurity if the girl, a sister or a wife or another female member of the family is doing as well or better than you, is smarter than you, more successful than you, it is still very hard to take it. It's not going to be easy to address this. We have the concept of anuloma and viloma in this country. In case of marriage, the boy must be always higher and better. Better educated, higher job, better salary, better everything. That is a standard expectation. That's how the whole society functions. In that climate, there are only two options. Either you guarantee that girls are always inferior in terms of their material success, which is not what women's empowerment is, or we figure out a way of dealing with this without insecurities coming to the surface, which will eventually lead to disharmony in the family or breakdown of families or gender violence or discrimination. But this is a battle to be fought in every family. It can't happen by law, it can't happen by speeches. Each family, each of us, as parents, as husbands, as brothers, we all have to figure out how do we deal with this. I'm an optimist. I believe at least those sections that have the benefit of education and opportunity and some reasonable economic security, they have the capacity to overcome these challenges without destroying the cultural roots, the strengths of our society, because we also have strengths, as I mentioned. Without those strengths, this country would not have been so harmonious and peaceful on the whole. But it's not guaranteed that that will happen to everybody everywhere. Just one tidbit before I conclude. You go to any government school, if you notice, in general, in government schools, the girls outnumber boys. You know why? You don't have to pay a fee. So fee-paying private schools, the belief is that there is better education there. There is no better education there or here. Everywhere education is rotten in this country. We are pretty socialist in that respect. But because there is a belief that if I pay a fee, there will be slightly better education, the boy is sent there. Because the state education is free, anyway it's the girl, therefore let her go to government school. I'm not going into the details of government school good, private school good, etc. But the broader approach, particularly in the poorer sections, you can just do a random testing. On a weekend, you just go to any government school, go to three government schools, you will find this. We have to change this bias. And of course, we have to improve the quality of education. That's a different debate altogether. We were discussing offline. Our education is in shambles in this country. We are a disgrace. We are arguably the world's worst education system. If you're all flourishing, it's not because of our education system. It's despite our education. You are the 1% Indians who had the intelligence, opportunity, good fortune. But most of the kids in this country cannot fulfill their potential because there's no education worth mentioning in this country. And if education becomes universal and of quality, not a degree, not a certificate, but actual quality outcomes, then again, the benefits will flow substantially to the sections that have been vulnerable, that have been disadvantaged throughout history. The women and the classes that were denied education for centuries in institutionalized discrimination. Therefore, in all this, while education is not the solution to all problems, it is the heart of the solution. The quality of educational outcomes, particularly at school level. I'm sure together we will make a difference and we will continue this march of progress because after all, not too long ago, women were never given any political rights. John Adams was one of the founders of American Republic. He was the second president after George Washington. He was Washington's vice president. His wife Abigail was a very distinguished lady, very learned, very cultured, very sophisticated. She wrote to her husband a memorable letter while they were drafting the Constitution of the United States. She said, "Please do not forget women. You're talking about all humanity, that all men are created equal. Please do not forget women." But despite that, they ignored women. Only in 1920, American women got the right to vote. In Britain, they started the journey of democracy in 1215, but only in 1928, women got the right to vote finally. Considering that, we made huge progress in the past century or so, but we still have a considerable distance to go, and I'm sure within the next generation, we will be able to overcome many of these challenges, but it requires, in every heart, a certain amount of serious introspection. It's not merely the law and the Constitution. It's not merely the economy either. It's also a battle in each heart in our country. I hope we will fight that battle successfully and make empowerment of women not merely a slogan, but real and meaningful for the benefit of everybody. As Gandhiji said, liberation of women is liberation of men. By enslaving women, men are the losers too. I hope we will together prosper and build a better world that transcends all these differences by birth. Thank you very much.